Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 84 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to break down some trades that just went down at the NFL trade deadline, talk about the impact that those moves have on fantasy football and the NFL in general. So before we get into that, though, I want to remind everyone, as always, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We're on everything out there, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure you're following along so you don't miss any future shows. And find us on social media as well. So we're on X or Twitter at Dynasty War Room. You can find our Facebook page, YouTube channel at the same handle. You can find me on socials as well at Andrew Vcourt. So we appreciate you following along. We're happy to answer any questions, hear about things you'd like to see on the show, and all that good stuff over there on the social media channels. And before we jump into some of these trades, I want to remind everyone of my friends over at Fast Draft. It's a new fantasy best ball app. It's awesome. They got drafts running all year round, different kinds of contests. And right now, if you download and deposit anything up to $50, you'll get your full deposit matched by using my code WARROOM. So that's all one word, WARROOM. And you'll get a $50 deposit match on Fast Draft today. So go check that out and see what kind of contests you might be interested in doing right now. Despite the fact that we are halfway through the NFL season, there's still plenty of different contests that you can enter. So again, code WARROOM on Fast Draft. All right, so let's talk about some trades. Now, this episode might be a little bit shorter than I was initially hoping, given the way that the trade deadline really has become a bigger deal over the years. There was a lot of hype about a number of key fantasy football players that could be moved at the deadline, and instead it ended up being a bit more explosive on the defensive side of the ball, not so much in terms of offense. However, a couple big trades to highlight, especially at the wide receiver position, along with a couple of players that did not get moved that we're going to talk about as well in terms of how that's going to impact fantasy and whatnot moving forward. So let's start with the Jakobi Meyers trade. So Jakobi Meyers, wide receiver, was traded from the Las Vegas Raiders to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he went for a couple of day 3 picks. And a pretty good trade, I think, from a compensation standpoint. I believe it was a 4th and a 6th rounder. So pretty nice return for the Raiders, who are not going to re-sign Myers. This was a getting rid of a guy before you got to pay him type of situation. And given the downward spiral that the Raiders are in, it made sense to move on. And I think for Jakobi Meyers, this is a relatively neutral trade in terms of his fantasy value. He's going to get a quarterback upgrade going from Geno Smith to Trevor Lawrence, but he's going to have to compete with Brian Thomas Jr. and Parker Washington, who has now taken over in the slot with Travis Hunter's injury. So a little bit more competition in terms of targets, but better quarterback play, better team, and so probably a net win, albeit barely, for Jakobi Meyers. My overall position on him is not going to change a whole lot. In Vegas, he was the number 1 receiver, but clearly was behind Brock Bowers in terms of the pecking order in the offense. So, doesn't have an elite tight end to worry about now at Jacksonville, but still has other players, Brian Thomas namely, that is going to be ahead of him in the pecking order. And in terms of how this impacts those players, so Brian Thomas Jr., starting outside receiver for the Jags, and this could impact him a little bit because Jakobi Meyers is one of those receivers that, moves the chains. He's a good first down guy that you can target on those over the middle routes. He's not necessarily going to be one of those big play, deep threat type of guys, but it's going to hurt Brian Thomas a little bit, although it could be in a similar way to what Travis Hunter was already doing. So it might not change the situation that much for Brian Thomas. But what I think is notable here is Parker Washington's going to be kind of the hot waiver wire guy, both in redraft and in Dynasty if he wasn't already rostered. But could this affect him? Possibly. I think that Parker Washington is still going to be on the field a bunch. He's going to be playing out of the slot. It has been a long known thing that Trevor Lawrence loves to target his receivers in the slot. He's done it over the years. Christian Kirk, Parker Washington now. Travis Hunter has had some snaps out of the slot. So hopefully for all of our sake, this shouldn't affect Washington too much. But it just makes it a little bit more complicated. You're probably not going to have as much confidence in starting Parker Washington this week. So you might need to see how things play out. But overall, I think it is relatively neutral for Jakobi Meyers. I don't think this is going to be some huge, impactful fantasy move. I think, frankly, this probably helps Trevor Lawrence the most because losing Travis Hunter is a big deal for them. He was a player that I thought was primed for a breakout here at the second half of the season. Obviously, with the knee injury that he suffered and the concern that he could be done for a considerable portion of the season, if not all of it, this is probably an important football move for Jacksonville as they try to make the playoffs. Now, in terms of how this impacts the Raiders, I think this is where you just have to be hopeful that this is where the rookies can get on the field. So you have Deontay Thornton, you've got Jack Besh, and Besh, somebody especially that was taken in the mid to late second round of most rookie drafts. Hopefully this will mean that he's on the field more and he's a little bit more involved in the passing attack. But Brock Bowers is still the guy there. He's the number one target, the number one receiver, despite having the tight end designation. And so I don't know that this is going to have a huge impact in terms of how well the Raiders offense runs or anything like that. I think this is big for Jack Besh, and that's really the key name to look out for in terms of a little bit of a boost for production with this trade. All right, so let's talk about probably the second biggest move in terms of the offensive side of the ball, and that's going to be Rashid Shaheed, wide receiver from New Orleans, traded to the Seattle Seahawks. So he went for a couple of picks as well, and this is an interesting move, and I don't think it is that great for fantasy. I can certainly see the appeal for Seattle from a real-life football standpoint, and unfortunately, that's how a lot of NFL trade deadline moves turn out, is, we have all these high hopes for these players going to great situations, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, this doesn't really help them for fantasy. It doesn't really help anyone involved from a fantasy football perspective, but you can see how it's helpful for Seattle in terms of actual real football. So Shaheed is a very good deep threat receiver. He had become a pretty reliable number 2 in New Orleans behind Chris Olave, a different style receiver certainly than Chris Olave, who is more of that possession receiver, whereas Shaheed, that deep threat. And unfortunately in Seattle, he's going to have to deal with a little bit better competition. So JSN is obviously going to continue to be the clear-cut number 1. Torrey Horton has had a nice breakout as a day 3 rookie. I think this hurts him the most, which is unfortunate because he was looking like a really good, day 3 find for Seattle. Cooper Kupp banged up right now, injured, just missed the most recent game. So this could be, I think, also a bit detrimental to his status, either a sign that he's going to be out for longer than expected, or just the kind of natural decline given the age for Cooper Kupp. But Shaheed could very well slot in as the number 2. He should still get some pretty good targets. He's going to get higher quality targets in Seattle with Sam Darnold over the mix and match going on at QB in New Orleans between Rattler and Tyler Shuck. So again, relatively neutral. I liked that he was getting so much opportunity in New Orleans. And despite New Orleans and their relative lack of talent, they've been largely competitive in most of their games. And Shaheed has had some productive, positive fantasy weeks. So I don't know if this is necessarily going to be great for him. It certainly doesn't get me excited. I think it's similar to the Jakobi Meyers move, makes a lot of football sense, and is relatively neutral in terms of fantasy impact. Although, again, there is that quarterback improvement going to Seattle from New Orleans. Now, in terms of how this affects the Saints and their group of receivers, I don't think this does a whole lot. I think it gives a slight boost to Devon Vele, who they acquired from the Broncos at the beginning of the season. He should be on the field more and kind of assume that number 2 deep threat role in the offense. But the Saints are bad. They're going to be in a position where you might get some garbage time points and whatnot from Vele, but it's Chris Olave and nobody else is really startable in terms of the receivers on that team, especially when the number 2 target really in the offense is going to be Juwan Johnson. So Johnson at tight end and, Kamara out of the backfield is getting some work, although he's struggled too. So outside of Chris Olave, I'm not that interested in anybody on the Saints offense. And but if you're really looking for a deep find in free agency, you have a couple roster spots now. Devon Vele could be the guy, and might be worth a little speculative add on the waiver wire. All right, now the third trade that involved a somewhat, I don't want to say relevant necessarily, but a name that has been mentioned throughout the season a little bit, and certainly when he was a rookie coming into the league out of Texas. That's wide receiver A.D. Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell traded from the Colts to the New York Jets as a part of the Sauce Gardner trade. So the Sauce Gardner trade was, of course, the huge trade that went down at the NFL trade deadline, and he is going to help the Colts out a ton in terms of their defense and all that. But A.D. Mitchell was kind of the little toss-in to the end of that trade. A couple first-round picks, and then wide receiver A.D. Mitchell. Now, on the surface, probably doesn't sound like much because, Mitchell wasn't that productive with the Colts. I thought he was highly overrated coming into the league out of Texas. Just a very, very inconsistent player. Everyone remembers the play earlier this year where he was running into the end zone for a touchdown and then ended up dropping the ball as he was crossing the goal line. It turned out to be a fumble. So it's been a bit of a rough go in Indianapolis, but now he goes over to the Jets, who have no one at wide receiver. I mean, it's Garrett Wilson and a whole lot of nothing. And Garrett Wilson has been a little bit banged up. And so this is a huge opportunity for A.D. Mitchell to reestablish some dynasty value and become a more relevant name in the dynasty space. And so Mitchell is, in my mind, going to become the number 2 essentially right away. He'll probably have to do a couple weeks here of getting in the mix and learning the playbook and whatnot to overtake some of the veterans on the roster like Josh Reynolds, and although he got hurt too, so it's a huge mess. In fact, I think Reynolds is on IR, so the opportunity is right there for the taking, and this is a team that's going to have to throw the ball. Now, obviously with Justin Fields, it's not going to be great. They're just not going to be a high-volume passing offense, but they're going to be playing from behind in a lot of games. Their defense, with the pair of trades that they made in terms of getting rid of Quinnen Williams along with Sauce Gardner, it's going to be much, much weaker, so you're going to have more teams scoring points on the Jets. That's going to mean more from the offense in terms of garbage time or having to play catch-up. So it's certainly a nice little buy low opportunity, or if you've had him on your team and you've just been hanging on, hoping for something, but haven't been ready to cut him because you took him in the second round of your rookie draft, well, here you go. This is your opportunity to either A, sell him and see if you can get somebody to buy in on the idea that he could be the number 2, or you can hold on and hope that he does get involved in this passing offense. So this is a move where I do think that Mitchell is a winner as a part of this trade because he was buried in Indianapolis. This just solidifies the fact that Alec Pierce is the clear number 3 in Indy. He's been very productive the last few weeks. And, so you have Michael Pittman, you've got Josh Downs, you've got Alec Pierce, and all 3 of those guys, this just solidifies their positions. Not that they were really in any doubt. But the kind of the low-key winner in this trade is actually Daniel Jones, because what the Colts did is they traded away their first-round picks for 2026 and 2027. That is not a move that a team looking for a quarterback makes. This is a team that has decided, hey, Daniel Jones is the dude. He has earned the starting job. He's going to get a big fat contract in the offseason, and he's going to be the Indianapolis Colts starting quarterback for at least the next couple years. So, that is big for him in particular. That was, outside of the shock value of a guy like Sauce Gardner getting traded, this was my immediate reaction was, whoa, this is good for Daniel Jones, because the Colts do not have the ammo now to be trading up in a draft, to be taking a first-round quarterback in general. So this is going to be Daniel Jones. And so if you held on to your shares of him despite the debacle in New York and all that, this is going to pay off huge for you, because it sure looks like Daniel Jones is following the path of, the Baker Mayfield, the Sam Darnold, the Jared Goffs of the world, who have solidified themselves as long-term starters. And I was a bit slow on Sam Darnold. I was still a doubter coming into this season. He has proven me wrong to this point. I was a little bit quicker to come around on the other guys. But Daniel Jones, I needed to see more than just the first 3 or 4 games of the season, but he's kept it up. The Colts have been great, and this clearly signals that the Colts are believers. So I think you can, start to fully value Daniel Jones as, a relatively long-term NFL starter. He's not an older guy, and I would be expecting, a 3-4 year contract at least, something in that Darnold Mayfield range, but probably with a higher dollar amount for Daniel Jones. So he's a big winner of this trade deadline. And, if you're looking for another winner from the Colts, again, Alec Pierce. But A.D. Mitchell wins from this trade too. So he's going to get on the field. He's going to get some opportunity. And so that's, the news as it relates to fantasy football, from the Sauce Gardner deal. All right, so in terms of big trades that actually happened, that's really it from an offensive standpoint. So not a lot of other moves to talk about. So instead, I want to discuss a few moves that did not happen and how that's going to impact fantasy football. So we have to start with the obvious name, and that is Breece Hall. So Breece Hall, New York Jets running back, was a highly discussed name. He wanted to be traded. I think the Jets wanted to move him. It was reported that the asking price was a 3rd-round pick. Now, that clearly did not come because he is still a member of the Jets. Despite New York trading away half of its defense, Breece Hall's still there. He's on an expiring contract, and you have to imagine that New York essentially said, look, we're going to get a comp pick for Breece Hall when he leaves, and we didn't get an offer better than that comp pick, and so he's just going to ride it out. There were some rumblings that potentially Kansas City had offered a 4th-round pick for him that could have had some conditions to lead it to a 3rd. If that's the case, I'm a little bit surprised that New York didn't accept it. But again, who knows if that's true? It's all speculative at this point. And Breece Hall is somebody that has had a couple nice games with New York. And, I think the general assumption was he would be traded. So this is, difficult. But you're still going to have to just plug him right into your lineup. He is still a very, very good running back. The Jets are going to have to try to do something to score points and whatnot. And you just have to put him right back in your lineup. It's kind of a bummer. It would have been nice for him to go to a better offense, a better team. But you also would have risked the possibility that he goes to a squad where he ends up forming a committee with somebody else. Or, let's say he goes to Kansas City. Well, you would think he becomes the true bell cow, but the Chiefs have been a frustrating team when it comes to the running back position for years now. I mean, right now you're talking Isaiah Pacheco, and granted he missed a game, but Brashad Smith and Kareem Hunt, and you got all these guys that are very mid. And I just don't know that you would have been able to trust it to a situation where he's used in the full bell cow manner that he's probably going to be used in New York. So at least you know what you're getting while he's on the Jets. He's going to be the 3-down guy for the most part. You'll get spelled by Isaiah Davis here and there, but this is just going to be more of the same, and you just have to hope that they feed him the rock because they know they're not going to re-sign him. Might as well have those numbers get pumped up to increase the contract he gets, to increase the comp pick that the team gets when he leaves. So that's really the thinking there. And along with that, we mentioned the Chiefs, but there were a number of teams that could have used the running back or were rumored to be in the market for running back who, excuse me, who all decided not to acquire a running back. So the Arizona Cardinals, they did not add a running back despite the injuries to Trey Benson and the mess that they've had with Bam Knight and DeMarcado and Michael Carter. The Chargers and their injuries with, Marion Hampton out, Najee Harris out, Hassan Haskins out. They did not add anyone. So this is going to be the Kamani Vidal show until Marion Hampton returns, which is probably not going to happen until after the Week 12 bye for the Chargers. And in all likelihood, it's going to be a couple weeks after that. So in terms of the fantasy season, I don't know if you're going to have the confidence to start him as soon as he's back in the fantasy football playoffs. So you really, really got to hope that he returns in week 13 or 14, because otherwise it's going to be a really, really difficult decision to make, and you're probably going to want to leave him on the bench. The Commanders did not add a running back despite their poor run game. Now, I think the Jaden Daniels injury and the fact that their team has taken a clear step back certainly affects that. Probably not a playoff team this year, so not necessarily in a big position to go out and get someone. And then the New England Patriots, who had been rumored to be interested in running backs, did not add someone. So that's great news for Travion Henderson. There's Terrell Jennings there, Ramondre Stevenson, of course, who is injured, but the big winner there is Travion Henderson. And so between him, Kamani Vidal, the other big winner here, I think the Chargers and the Patriots were the two teams that were really, really rumored to be going after a running back other than Kansas City. And so Vidal and Henderson get to keep their positions in the depth chart right now without a fear of somebody coming in via trade. Now, we mentioned the Jets defense getting worse, and that's certainly going to impact fantasy football because opposing offense is going to have a better time going against New York, which was not always the case because despite the bad record and whatnot, the defense had been solid. It was a decent defense, but now certainly worse, losing a couple of their key pieces. And Dallas is the other defense that was affected by the trade deadline, but in the opposite way. So the Cowboys had been one of these terrible defenses that were great for opposing fantasy teams, but they went out, got Logan Wilson, and then Quinnen Williams at defensive tackle from New York. So Cowboys defense got a little bit tougher. That's going to impact fantasy, especially running backs, I think, when it comes to Quinnen Williams. They're still a team that, you're going to be able to throw the ball against them for sure. We saw Jacoby Brissett tear them apart the other day. But, a little bit of bad news in terms of the Cowboys defense. I think it was fun for fantasy to have Dak, throwing 40-plus times a game and that offense airing it out. But from a football standpoint, you can certainly understand that the Cowboys were looking to improve their defense. And, they were able to, make this move without giving up a 2026 first-round pick. They gave up the better of their first-round picks in 2027 in this deal for Quinnen Williams. So shouldn't affect things too much for, moving forward in terms of how the outlook for the Cowboys is going to be, but they're going to be a little bit tougher to run against. Speaking of the Cardinals, they made headlines today as well. We're recording this just after the trade deadline, about an hour after that 4 o'clock Eastern time deadline. And Jacoby Brissett is going to be taking over as the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. So Kyler Murray benched, obviously had the injury issues, but it seems like, moving forward right now, injury or not, Brissett is playing well enough that they're going to keep riding with him. So Marvin Harrison Jr. has been better with Brissett. The offense in general has looked better. So I can't say it's terribly surprising. I've been a big Kyler Murray guy for a while, but this summer was just one of those things where, look, he's had chance after chance after chance. He's got all the tools to be an elite quarterback, to be an elite fantasy quarterback especially, and he just has never been able to do it. He doesn't run the ball enough like he should, and everything's finally caught up to him. There were always concerns about his off-the-field preparation, and Jacoby Brissett, kind of the opposite, was always high-quality backup, prepared well. Teams wanted him. He's bounced around, but he's always landed other jobs, and no one's going to mistake Jacoby Brissett for being more talented than Kyler Murray. And I would expect that Kyler Murray probably ends up the starter again at some point. But, Brissett is playing well. And so right now you just let Kyler Murray get back to 100% health, and you kind of ride this wave until you can't. So Jacoby Brissett taking over in Arizona, I think this is positive for McBride, positive for Marvin Harrison. The run game has struggled regardless. So, but for the two big pass catching options, I think this is beneficial for them. And the last piece of news I wanted to discuss, another team that did not make a trade was the Green Bay Packers. So they did not add a tight end, which had been rumored. Sounds like there were some discussions with the Raiders about Michael Mayer, and that did not come to fruition. So Luke Musgrave is going to be taking over at tight end for Green Bay, given the Tucker Kraft injury, which is a huge bummer. If you have listened to this show for any length of time, you know that I am a big Tucker Kraft fan. He was a player that I was on early as a rookie, and saw the breakout in the path to him overtaking Musgrave in Green Bay. And so now, unfortunately, things have shifted with the ACL tear, and Musgrave is going to have an opportunity to get back on the field. So, hopefully Tucker Kraft heals up and is ready to go for next season. And Green Bay's offense is going to have to change the way that they operate a bit, because Luke Musgrave is simply not as good of a tight end as Tucker Kraft. They do have Christian Watson back, so that's a name to watch on the waiver wire. If you're in a redraft league especially, go see if he's out there, because he could be someone that takes an even larger role in the Green Bay offense moving forward. So go check him out. He could be a nice little buy low opportunity in Dynasty. I've been in on him before and been burned, but I think now the cost is so low that he's a pretty reasonable player to go out and trade for. So there you have it. I have not seen any other big NFL news come across as we have been recording this podcast, and so given that's the case, I will sign off. I want to remind you all that there will not be a podcast next week. Got too much else going on. I'm going to be out of town for a business trip, so no podcast next week. But we will be back the following week, and we'll get into a rookie draft review and or redo, review. Either way, however you want to say it. Say that 10 times fast. And, so we'll get into it, but no show next week. Thank you all very much for tuning in today. And the fantasy football playoffs are fast approaching. So, we're only a few weeks away. So you got trade deadlines coming up in your leagues. Go see if you can make any moves. And by the time we come back for another show, we'll talk about, how to best get ready for the playoffs as well, in addition to talking some rookies and some trade reviews. So, thank you all very much for tuning in. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and you have been listening to the Dynasty War Room podcast.